Coming up on today's episode of Let's Talk Blood Cancer, the Patients Podcast, I'm joined on the sofa by Cure Leukaemia's Chief Executive Officer, James McLaughlin, who tells us what it was like when this charity was just 1 hour from going bust. And we hear all about the emotional pressures that he faces as a charity chief executive and just how difficult operating in this space can be. Welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Blood Cancer, the Patients Podcast, hosted by me, Adam Joyce, Cure Leukaemia patron and former blood cancer patient myself. And today I'm joined on the sofa by a man that many of you will recognise, and that's our CEO, James McLaughlin. James, welcome to the sofa. It's been a long time coming, actually, to get you on this sofa. And thinking about the questions I've got to ask you, there's quite a few juicy ones in here that I'm excited about. James, you became CEO in 2012, but tell us a little bit about what you were doing prior to that.
Yeah, so obviously career before Cure Leukaemia was predominantly sport. I've been in sport for 15, 16 years, commercial director at Edgbaston Cricket Ground, and like you said, 2012, the opportunity to become chief exec of CL, became apparent, and it's been a fantastic move, and something 14 years on, I'm still thrilled to be.
It seems a very different role being the CEO of a charity to executive director, was it that you said?
Commercial director.
Commercial director.
Yeah, I think when you're commercial director, you're not the boss. You're still reporting into a chief exec. So to have that, I suppose, that responsibility as a chief exec, that was the big step. One I think I was always wanting, whether it was in sport or obviously with CL. It's a responsibility that I really cherish.
And I proudly refer to our charity, and it was you that kind of instilled that in me. But what was it that drew you to our charity all that time ago? Why come and work for CL? Yeah,
20 years ago this summer I joined Edgbaston and got to know about Cure Leukaemia through Ashley Giles, and he said go and meet Craddock, and Julie went and met him. And I made Cure Leukaemia the charity partner for Edgbaston Cricket Ground. So it's been 20 years, the partnership or sort of association. And then I got asked to be a trustee in 2010. And I think that was where I really got the bug, was seeing it firsthand, turning up at the meetings. And, you're sort of thinking this thing's got huge potential. And you could see from Charlie and Graham Silk and such like the passion and the drive to do so much better on the clinical side. But you were looking on the fundraising side and thinking, sort of lagging behind the ambition of what was happening clinically. In 2012, it was whether fate happens, whatever you believe in, but I got a tap on the shoulder and after a trustees meeting and sort of got, asked as whether this would be of interest. And here we are 14 years later.
Did that feel like an honour? Being, are you interested in a role? Because generally you have to go searching for your own roles, don't you?
Yeah, one is an honour, and also, did I feel sort of I could be a chief exec? I think that was the sort of that was a reality of like you get a bit of protection when you're not the boss, because everyone will always say, well, I think I could do this, and if I did it, and then suddenly somebody was giving you that opportunity to go, right, it's yours now, and it was like, well, it's one of those kind of things.
What did you think you were signing up for?
Well, I think the weird thing was that we just won a charity partnership with BBC WM, and the partnership was worth £500,000. So you were sort of like, wow, we're going in at a big level. And then pretty quickly into the job, you realise that actually it wasn't £500,000, and it was the potential for the charity to raise that kind of money.
Right.
Which very quickly then meant, well, hang on, we've already got a big hole here in terms of the numbers point. So the reality kicked in pretty quick. But it was, again, one of those kind of things. In a weird way, it was the best thing to happen because we had to hit the ground running, and that's what we did.
And you said that you weren't used to being the boss, and that was a big change for you. But there clearly was, transferable skills and qualifications, if you like, that you brought to the role. What gave you the edge? What gave you advantage?
I think the business skills, I think that was what was lacking from the charity. I think, a lot of charities have some really good people who want to do good. But I think what you have to realise is, a charity is a business. We have responsibilities to provide funding, no different to any other kind of major business. You want to generate money, it's what you do with that money. And I think really the pressure that I'd felt always in sport was you had to raise money, you had budgets to hit. But most probably if you're in football or cricket, that money was just going back into a football or cricket budget. This one had such a tangible sort of return that actually it was really clear to me was you bring more money in, we fund more amazing nurses and let the magic happen. So yeah, it was always the business brain had to kick in and maybe not always the charitable side, which sounds a bit of a strange one, but it's the reality.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because knowing you like I do, I know that that's not always as easy as we may say it is, separating the business and charity. But when you look back at starting your journey with CL, what early visions did you have for us?
I think just to get through that first year and, really get as close to that 500,000 as possible. I didn't have any grand visions. I think I always remember doing a review after the first 8 weeks and realising that we weren't really known within Birmingham. I think somebody had said, are you moving away from the region? People didn't know who Cure Leukaemia, were. So I think that was the first thing, was actually we had to get known in our own region first. So that was the real big thing. And then from there, you can start to build. And I was very fortunate, really great board of trustees, always had a great board of trustees and chairman that have then backed that vision to sort of say, look, this is going to take time. And I think the danger is when you're new, people expect you to work miracles and change stuff. And I think actually that was never going to happen, but it was a sort of continuous improvement and growth that luckily I've been given that time to do that.
And what does a typical week look like for you? And I absolutely recognise the charity has changed so much since 2012. I've been fortunate to be involved, for longer than you have.
Yeah.
But what is a typical week like for you?
Yeah, I think it's by becoming more national in terms of the reach that we have. So it's now being more, sort of out and about and obviously going around the centres, hospitals, meeting the doctors and nurses. I think, more of our business is not, just Birmingham based as it was. So you're out and about. So I spend less time in the office, which most probably, the team are quite happy about, and then they're most probably too upset with that. But I think that's the thing, is then having the time with the team. I've got a great team that you can empower, that yes, you're there to push and challenge, because that's, I think, the role of hopefully a good CEO. But you also want them to grow. And I think in a weird way, not being in the office actually means that you can have that bit of breathing space. But it's good for me because I love going out and about. And you hear, I think going to the hospitals, you hear firsthand what they really need and what's making a difference. So yeah, I think, it's never the same. And I think that's been always the great thing. I've always had these roles that you're not stuck at a desk.
Yeah.
I think that my boredom level would kick in quite quickly.
And is that one of the things that keeps you motivated, the fact that it's never normally the same? Because you've been doing this a long time now, and forgive me, but my assumption would be perhaps that people don't necessarily stay in your role for a charity for this amount of time? Yeah,
and I think, so in sport, the longest role I'd had was 6 years, and in sport they're very much project-based. You sort of, Edgbaston, Southampton, both big stadium builds, really proud of being part of those. But they have a shelf life because the management structure is normally quite tight, so you don't have that growth. And I think the benefit here is that I think if I ever felt that we were just treading water, then I think I'm not doing my job, and I think then maybe that's time. But every year just seems to always have another new challenge, and we create our own challenges, I suppose. We create our own destiny sometimes, and that's the exciting thing. I've always said to the guys that there's no rules in our job. So you can create something, and hopefully that spark that gets people to support or do something crazy for us or support us.
But it's not always easy though, is it, James? It would be wrong to sit here and almost paint the years that you've been at the helm of CL that it's always been easy, because it hasn't, has it? And during those times of difficulty, how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, I think it's really easy. You bring it right back to patients. The first thing that happened when we won WM is we met this lovely guy, Tony de Grey, and sadly Tony's no longer with us, but what an inspiration. And Jeff Hill have passed away. Some really lovely people who have died too young of this horrible disease. And I think I look at patients that are far better and well, and you normally hear yourself. It's this. You've been to a place that no one ever wants to. And I've been fortunate enough, and the team have been fortunate never to be there. So what can be as bad as that? And I think you have to find some balance and then say, right, we've got to do the best we can. Life's tough. We have our personal challenges, battles going on, but they have to stop when you get into the office, and you have to do what's right for those people that need us. And I think we have that responsibility to do that.
you say that you've never been there, but vicariously you have. You've been on so many blood cancer journeys with patients, people who have become your friends. I know that. How do you manage the emotional weight of your role and your involvement with patients?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think, so Tony and Tony and Jeff most probably the toughest, where, being told by Tony first up before he told his wife that he was going to pass away, that he had no more to do, there were no more options. And Jeff passing away, and I'd met Jeff once. It's crazy that you meet this guy once and you have this, you could tell you had this immediate connection. He loved Guinness, so we were always going to get on.
Yeah.
And the guy passed away, and on both times I just, I was inconsolable. Certainly the Jeff one, going into work, and I walked into the office and I was a crying wreck, and I don't think people had seen me like that. But it's crazy to think that you have that, but that's what people do to you. And I felt so upset for Jeff and his family, and Tony and his family, and I love the other guy, James Cunningham. They such a great zest for life that was taken away from them. So it's tough, and yeah, you go home, you cry, you mark their anniversaries, but I think they wouldn't want you moping around. I know that, and I know every year Tony's anniversary comes, and it's sort of like a badge of honour to sort of show him every year that we're making a bit more progress, mate, and I'm sure he's looking up there.
It almost sounds like it's an inspiration for you.
Yeah, without doubt. And God, I'd love them to be there, because I think we'd be having a great laugh now, and they'd be so happy. But it also meant that, when you have to speak at someone's funeral, I've never had to speak at a funeral, and that responsibility, I never had that in. Why would I ever think that was going to be? And when you get the message from his wife, Di, saying, he's tucked you up here, you're going to have to do the last eulogy. I went with the Birmingham City tie on, because it was like I had to not make it a sad thing. And, his coffin's by me, and, this is not, that's definitely not what I signed up for. No. Naively, you're there going, I'm going to raise a load of money and do some good. Little did you ever think that you were then going to become somebody that their family thought was, I don't know, of a person that could speak about their husband and their dad. And my biggest thing was to make sure I didn't let him down at the funeral, and we made it a bit of fun, and as we did. But yeah, it's total inspiration. But equally, the people who are fit and well and survived, we know so many, yourself, Mark, Jenna, Lizzie, all these amazing people, they're back living their lives, and I think that for me gives me that buzz, because how amazing to see them living their lives, but also still giving back to us. How many years on, they could easily walk away and move on with their lives, but this selflessness of people, to give back is just something that is a sort of mutual kind of buzz that we would never expect to want to meet each other.
No.
None of us nobody wants to meet me, and that's just outside of work. You know what I mean? But they do, and then we just have this connection, and it's a real privilege.
So James, you've given us some really strong examples there about how leadership in business is very different to leadership in charity. But what does success actually look like for you? Because I'm sure it would be obvious to suggest, well, more patients surviving is success, but we've got to strip it back a bit, haven't we? So what does it look like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether you do have to strip it back. That's the role. Is my responsibility is to keep the funding going for, Charlie and all these amazing clinicians and his colleagues across the UK. I think. So yeah, I don't know. You can overcomplicate it. The pressure is there. And I think the biggest thing is that no 2 years are the same. And I suppose that's where the sport has helped. You can be top of the league one year and you can be bottom of the league next year. So you have to keep a level ground. I think that's the bit for me, is making sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves, because you can be successful in one way, but equally the next year it can come back and fall around you without you even knowing, and through no fault of your own. I think that's the problem. So yes, I think success is just, for me, making sure I can look Charlie and Co in the eyes and go, we've delivered for what you need us to do. Outside of that, it's great having awareness, and lots of people can get excited about certain things and the events we do, but ultimately you've got to bring it back down to saying, can we fund more research nurses? Can these allow more trials to be run? And we know what happens when more trials hopefully get run.
So is it a permanent state of trepidation then, that say when funds are performing well and wholesome, and you can see that we're sustainable, are you always on edge thinking, well, this could all change next week, next month?
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest risk to the charity still. We've done we had to grow as an events-based charity for many reasons. But with events, hence COVID, you can see what happened. So our biggest challenge is still to get more regular income coming through to us that doesn't rely on us all doing crazy bike rides, running and whatever else, but actually be of a scale where there's money coming into us because people want to just donate to Cure Leukaemia. And it's sort of like that's like your wages coming in, really. If you were saying to people in any kind of job, well, you've got to hope that 3 months of the year will give you some money. But it depends on all different kind of factors. I think you'd be going, ooh, that's a bit shaky. And I think that's the problem, the challenge for us is that it's great when you get charity partnerships, but they might only last 1 year or 2 years. And that's, they're great reasons. But equally, that doesn't help you plan for the long term.
No.
And in any kind of business, you want to be able to say, well, what's our 3 or 5 year plan? And that's always harder to do. So sometimes that's where that balancing is that you can never get too far ahead of yourself because you might have a great year on one event. That doesn't mean next year it's going to be the same. So you can't plan. So you do have to keep that balance, which is, again, it's a tricky skill, but one you have to navigate, and hopefully over the years we've been able to.
And is there a moment, James, that you look back and you think, do you know what, this is really working. I can see progress here. What I and my team, and I know you talk so wholesomely about your team, what we are trying to achieve is actually happening.
Yeah, I think there's, I suppose, twofold really, was, winning Deutsche Bank back in 2017, which is scary. That almost killed us, as a team of 5 people as we were. But that's what competitive comes in. We were told, you won't win this, and there's 100 other charities. But it was transformational because it put us at a scale where not only did it raise £2.5 million, which was brilliant, and the drug of winning. Of course, it was the best work phone call I've ever taken. But what it meant was that we were able to then fund the TAP network, and then from that we've been able to open those new trials, and it gives us that credibility. And I think then when we also got a sort of an extension of the Flutter partnership this year that we just announced, a global partnership. You sort of go, this is a global brand, I think $8 billion business. And it's like little Cure Leukaemia from Solihull Moors. And I think the moment that we ever lose that, I think we'll trip up. And so those two big things, you sort of look and go, wow, we've come a long way. And people put their trust in us. And I think that's the thing, is that transparency there, that people can see that when these companies raise money for us, they know, and they can. That's, for me, is a massive. They want to see the transparency. If we give you this money, we want to meet the nurses. We want to see the nurses, but we want to meet the patients. And that's why I think those partnerships continue, I suppose.
And for context, James, for those who will be watching who may not be familiar with what we achieved with Deutsche Bank, what did that bring to Cure Leukaemia? Yeah,
I mean, it was an opportunity to be the national partner for 2 years, and it came from a dragon boat event in Birmingham, and we got to know Paul Anderson, and so dressing up as Scooby-Doo as we did, most probably all helped. But it was that ability to transform the charity. The partnership had to be seen to transform a charity. And it was perfect because they limited it. So it wasn't available for the big guns on the charity side. So it was actually designed perfectly for us to say, look, we're a regional charity. This is what we do. We just want to take this national. And like I said, the phone call you get, the money was great. And you're so competitive. 5 other charities and 3 weeks of running around London and, doing all kinds of things. But to get that phone call was so emotional. But the first thing you do, you phone Charlie, and he puts you on the phone to a patient called Matthew, who I've never met, but he went, and the guy went, thank you for all you do for people like me. And it just brought it straight back as, the win was great, but that's why that's what it meant. And then we went to the pub. So,
As we do. When do you think you will achieve what you set out to achieve, if ever? Is there a goal for you?
Yeah, I think there's got to be a shelf life for me. Of course, I think the point is when we're sustainable without the need for the big events. And that's not to say that that's bad, but we're not sustainable yet. So we have to work so hard. So that, like I said, you're never off the throttle. What you want is the train, I said, sort of to keep running. You want it to be able to just happen. And then all of the stuff that we want isn't dependent on bike rides, running, all the other stuff. That should just be the bonus, and then you could do extras with that.
Yeah.
And that's the bit there. Then I think you'd be in a situation where you could go, okay, leave it to someone else, and and there will be a time, and when that time is, then I hope somebody can take it on to even better
Let's
levels.
not talk too much about that. We don't want to consider that. When you meet and hear patients' stories, do you ever have to limit the effect that those stories have on your decisions as a CEO? Or actually, is it the other way around? Do you talk to patients and families and supporters of the charity, and they do actually give you direction?
Yeah, I think the best example, patients and families always want the best for the charity. I don't think anybody's ever thought of, I've got, an idea and you have to do it. I've been lucky in that respect. I think the best example is come back to Jeff Hill again, is that obviously the Tour 21 in 2021, we'd cancelled 2020 because of COVID. And at the time I was getting a little bit of heat about, we should be cancelling the 2021 version because, there was a lot of, obviously, uncertainty around the event. And I still remember exactly where I was when he went, don't you dare cancel this event. Don't you dare give up on us. And that's quite a bullish thing for a bloke who then had to go upstairs and sort of say, I don't know if I'm going to be around by Christmas, so don't let me down. Oh. And that responsibility but actually it was totally the right thing. It was like, we knew we had to get this event on, so why would you give up and take the easy option? Is to, I was getting a bit of heat. You could have easily just gone, oh, it's a lot easier to cancel because, a few people aren't happy with me. And actually you sort of double down a bit more. It's like, no, hang on, guys, this is what we're doing this for people like Jeff. And
that's not stubbornness, is it? That's the business brain.
Yeah, it's the business brain. Because actually the point is that what else were you doing? You'd trained for it, so you weren't going to miraculously have a business life in those 3 weeks because you were ready to set aside. And funnily enough, we got that nod that the French changed the regulations, and we had a crazy 10 days of getting everyone into the start line, and off we went. And I genuinely believe that if that event hadn't happened in 2021, Cure Leukaemia wouldn't be here today. I think
you really believe that?
Yeah, because you had the year of COVID where all our research nurses were on COVID work, but they were back in 2021 doing blood cancer work and trials, but we didn't have the money coming in. So you would have had a mismatch of commitments, and we wouldn't have been able to afford those commitments. So in a way, it was like we had to take it, and we did take it to the wire. And
so it doesn't even sound like it was a gamble. It was a decision that you had no choice but to make.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you could have, said no and said, oh, I'm sure we would have tried to. But actually, what were the other options? There wouldn't have been. But like I said, it was those words, don't you dare let me down. And that's a pretty powerful thing when you're stood in a garden, hearing someone say that to you. And thankfully we didn't, and I don't think we did let him down.
And I think most people have got a really good understanding of how money comes into a charity, and us at CL, as you've described us, very much an events-based charity. But do you think there's a full understanding of how we're spending that money and the ground-breaking work that's actually happening out in hospitals?
I hope so. I think we've, in the last couple of years in particular, we've done a much better job of doing that. And I think that's because we've got such great relationships with all the centres now. So we talk about the CL family from a patient perspective. I think in the last 18 months in particular, I think that's really grown within the whole of that blood cancer community. I think we've got so many clinicians, nurses supporting CL, and they now see why we need these patient stories, why we need the trial info, because actually when you're talking to these, big companies, but also when you're talking to other people who want to donate, whether that's £5 or £50, they still want to know where their money's going. So when you can actually say, meet this nurse, hear this nurse's story, see about the new trials, we've got more trials to announce this summer. This is why I do what I do, as opposed to it's just going into a great cause. I think that phrase is used a lot.
Yeah.
Every cause is great. I think you always want to see some benefit and go, actually, and hopefully that means they commit to doing it again. And it doesn't have to be cycling or running. It's whether they keep their donation of £5 a month because they say, well, that person's life or that trial is happening because of what I've done. And I think I always want us to make sure that yes, it's great having growth, but the £5 from somebody is as important as a £50,000.
And we've never forgotten
that. And I hope not. No,
which is wonderful. What's here at CL, we talk a lot about research nurses and trials. What's the importance, or help our viewers understand the importance of research nurses?
Yeah, without the nurses, the trials don't happen. You know, the NHS won't fund those directly. So by being able to fund those nurses, I think you see the relationship between a research nurse and a patient is so critical. And they're there to guide, obviously, the patients and their family through that journey, because it's not an easy journey, but also it's the information, the data is a hugely data-led role. It's a really time, consuming. I think come back to Tony again. Tony, we managed to get Tony on a trial, which he knew wasn't going to save him, but what he wanted to do was have his findings help others in the future, and that's a special character that he was, and that drug, one of the drugs, is now standard of care, which is 13 years on. So that's the importance, and I think that's the importance of the trials, is bringing that innovation, but obviously more hope to patients than they would have had maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
And we talk about this, the fundraising, and most people get it that it's difficult in the charity sector. But you, being at the top of a charity, tell us what the truth is about competing in the charity sector.
Yeah, it's as competitive as anything. I think that people think it isn't. It is, the Deutsche Bank, as I said, 100 charities gets whittled down from 100 to 20. You had to do a big presentation to the board. It was like Dragon's Den and The Apprentice. 15 minutes, that's it, you're in and out. And then you have to go through a vote. And I think the vote is a big challenge, because you have to persuade lots of people who might not have that emotional connection. Because obviously what happens with a lot of fundraising, of course, people in any charity have got that emotional reason. But when you're trying to persuade people within companies to vote, you have to stand apart. And I think that the one biggest thing I always remember with Deutsche Bank was that one of the team there said that you came across with so much hope that actually if I was going to do something crazy, I could make a difference, as opposed to some charities where it was just felt like it was too sad, and that if they were going to give up and do something, it couldn't make a difference. So I think we've always had to try and find that balance of, we're trying to find a cure, so you can't be too sad, but equally you have to put that reality that it is, not everyone does sadly survive. But it's robust, and winning partnerships. It's when we announce them, it isn't just because we just got them because we're nice people.
They
and you have to put a lot of work in. With Deutsche Bank is 8 months' worth of hard work, really. And if the call had been sorry, but no,
that's the end of that.
Goodness knows what would have.
Do you think there's any misunderstanding about where charitable money goes?
I think people always want to say, well, how does the charity use money? I think that you have to pay for staff, you have to pay for good things, and so I think again we've always had a really supportive board. Is that you have, I want good people in the team, and we've got a great team, but you have to pay for good people. So I think that as long as we're being responsible with those funds, and I think that's what people can see. I think people understand the model. They also understand that we are really only been national since 2021, where you look at a lot of those big charities, they've been going 60, 70 years. So, we have to remember where we are and also where we've come from. But also is that we don't have the benefit of 400, 500 places in the London Marathon, but big charities do. Now, if we had 400 places...
It's about 10 for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 10, right? So, if you had 400... that'd be nearly £1 million for us for doing effectively not a lot. So you can plan a lot better, and you can, but that's the challenge that we face. But I think as long as people feel that we're responsible with the funding, and that's why I have a board of trustees, because that's who I'm accountable to, and I've never forgotten that.
And when we talk about wonderful people, I mean, your sporting links have got us some pretty impressive names: Gary Lineker, Gareth Southgate, Ben Foster. How important is it for a charity to have household names that can deliver a charity message for us?
Yeah, I think really important. I think, a lot of charities have some great patrons, and, Jeff Thomas is most probably the big name really that I remember. Hence, I sort of got involved and read Jeff's story, but, Jeff's brought us Gary and Gareth, which is amazing. I've been able to obviously connection with Ben over the years from when we were at Watford, Jonathan Trott from Warwickshire days and such like. I think what's really important is that all of them they've played a key part in what we do. So they're not just a name on a letterhead. I think that's really important, that people can actually see that they're synonymous, and also why they want to support and how they support. I think that's really important. And, you look at Ben, for example, 20 years ago, we were both turned up at Watford. How our careers have gone, slightly different in different ways. And somehow we end up coming back together because of a bike ride 10 years ago and off we go. But, we're very fortunate with those patrons that do so much because it does make a massive difference. And having a Gary doing a video, to Deutsche Bank, to all those employees, that helped us win £2.5 million. So from him, from his side of life, he thinks, well, he's really added value back to us.
And how quickly is blood cancer research moving now compared to how it was when you took on the role in 2012?
Yeah, I think it's only the scale of the trials that are coming through. I think that's what's amazing. More and more new treatments are coming through. I think that's what's exciting, and you hear in that. And I think go back 14 years ago, I think we didn't really talk about trials. We didn't really talk about much of the output. I think we talked about funding nurses, but we didn't really have that bit about going, well, hang on, what does Evolve 1 and 2 mean for patients with AML, and what's it mean for people in Manchester or Newcastle or such? And I think that's the exciting thing, as opposed to with some sort of research, funding some sort of research nurses, and that's great. So I think that's it. I think the world has opened up about. I think the biggest thing for me is innovation. Everyone talks about AI and innovation. One of the biggest areas in innovation is in the space of clinical trials, because actually you keep pushing those boundaries every year, you're going to get more benefits, and I think that's why people align with us sometimes, that we have that innovation and acceleration to find a cure fits with some of those business values. So it's not just about the charity being a nice charity. Someone can hook into that and say, well, actually, we're an innovative company, or we want to be number one. Well, actually, we want the best for our patients, and that's coming from Charlie and Chris Fox, Steve Napper, etc. I think there's that nice synergy there.
And that makes me want to ask you, when you talk about innovation and acceleration, you looking forward, say, 5-10 years, what excites you?
Being able to fund more nurses and then open more trials. It's that simple. And I know that there's an unmet need at the moment, is that, we don't cover enough of the country. So if you're a patient, bringing it back to patient, if you're having to drive an hour or be driven an hour or two to get access to treatment, that's not great if you're a patient. And the only reason that people are having to do that drive is because we haven't got the funding in the right regions. So you have this kind of, I think, a lot of the clinicians talk about equity of access, so that should be there for everyone, not just because you happen to live in a big city. So that's the exciting thing, is that's why it never stops. I don't think it'll ever stop. I think, and I pushed the clinicians, to say, what would we do with an extra £1 million?
Yeah.
Actually, guys, we need to tell people that story. So actually, do we want to double the footprint of research nurses, or do we want to put more nurses into the existing hospitals? They're the experts on that, not us. I think our job is to be their champion and their foot soldiers, and let them then be responsible for the money.
What makes you so proud of what CL represents today?
I think the humbleness of us as a charity. I think it's a massive. I think there are so many like-minded people. And I think you'll know at events, and I'll sort of say, oh, Adam, do you know? So, yeah, of course I do. We did this a couple of years ago, and I'm always keen to introduce other people. And you forget, actually, you've ridden this, or you've met him there, or heard there. And then when you see other people going off and riding in Spain with each other, and you go, how does he and she know each other, but they pop up on Strava, and then you sort of in their CL colours, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think the humbleness is there, is that people just want to do good. But also have some fun. I think we do have some fun along the way, and I think there is a balance there, and I think hopefully we get that balance right over the last few years.
And here's the thing: you as an individual, cycling, endurance, you've ran over 1,000 miles between our centres throughout the country. Some might say, well, that's not the gaffer's job. Others would say, well, actually, here's a leader leading by example. From your personal opinion, why do you do so much to raise so much money?
I think we ask a lot of people, so whether it's those endurance challenges, and I think I've been able, mostly a personal thing, is that I want to be able to look people in the eyes. And when you're asking people to raise £30,000 for Tour de France, or £10,000 for the route, I think I want to be able to say, so if someone questions, so we do have that, it's not all plain sailing when people, say they're going to raise money for us. You can look people in the eye and then somebody say, well, okay, you have done that, and it's difficult, and it's year on year it's difficult, so you have to keep coming up with. But I think that for me is the biggest thing is there. But I just love that opportunity to raise awareness for the cause. But I think the biggest thing, certainly with the running, was to get round to those hospitals to bring CL to life. They didn't know who CL were 5-6 years ago, and why should they? And then some ginger hair guy starts running around their centres or whatever and telling them to do it, and then they go, oh, we quite like that, and it's grown and whatever. So,
grown into a bit of a Forrest Gump story, that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot worse, but it was. Yeah, I think that was the thing. It was a collective. It was great to see it grow, and seeing people from all walks of life coming in and doing their bit. And it was.
See, I wouldn't ask you this, but what you've just said is, well, it just keeps going and going. So on the back of that, then, what's the next challenge?
I don't know yet. Yeah. There will be another one. I think it's just
there
fine.
We go. That's commitment.
Yeah. There always will be. I think you have. Yeah, I think as long as the knees and the feet or whatever take you, this is what gets you through. And I think that's the thing, because patience, it brings it back. Yeah, it's tough when you're doing the running and the travelling. But I still feel that's a privilege until injury takes you over. So I think that, there will be another silly thing, but it's got to be the right thing that brings people together, but also it's got to be big enough that raises substantial money. There's no point going out the office for 2 weeks to raise, a small amount of money.
Because your time is
but that's
lost,
also that, and also it's wasting a lot of people's time. But I think when you raise, hopefully, decent sums of money and bring people together, and have some fun along the way, then hopefully that's not a bad model.
And you talk of pride, and I absolutely accept that this question is asking you to sort of talk about yourself. And it is, what are you most proud about that you've achieved during your time?
I think getting the Tour 21 on.
Okay.
I think we were an hour away from going bust.
Yeah.
I do. Because if the regulations hadn't changed, I don't think I'd have seen a way out. And I still remember being on a park bench talking to Nigel Murray and saying, I think we're over. And I'm pretty resourceful. I always say there's always a key to open a door. I always there's always a key, right? And I think we'd run out of keys. And someone up there, most probably, I then got a message going, have you seen the French regulations are changing? And all hell broke loose for 24 hours. Yeah. And we then went down to Portsmouth to see the first ferry since COVID go out. And I think that's the biggest problem, because I think the stakes were so high to where we are now, and all of the great stuff that we celebrate and enjoy. I don't think those memories would have been there. And certainly from a clinical side, I don't think that progress would have been there. So the Tour 21 in 21, I think. And
on the back of that then, what are you most determined to achieve, let's just say in the next 10 years? I want to try and lock you in for another 10 years while you're on the sofa here. Yeah. But what are you most determined to achieve? Because we've spoken about what would be wonderful to achieve. Yeah. And of course, what the charity is called Cure Leukaemia.
Yeah. Atticus Network, I think, without a doubt, I've got this inner hunger that we have to get this kids network open.
And for those that might not be familiar who are watching Atticus.
Yep, so we do the trials network for adults with TAP and Impact, and the same network isn't available for children. And I've had the privilege of going around every children's hospital in the UK, talking to every clinician, and they're all saying the same. We can do more. We need to open this network because we can tell more kids and mums and dads that their kid has greater chance of survival. And as a dad myself, I can't think of anything worse than being told that we've run out of options. Matt Gort, lost Harry, he's a good friend of mine. He shouldn't be running London to Paris and raising money, to do that. I think if we open Atticus, get that network open, get these amazing clinicians opening these new trials for kids that need it, then I think that's that inner hunger, because that I think we're failing kids and their parents at the moment by not having that available. It's not you can't get the funding publicly, so we're going to have to do it ourselves, and that's why we carry on doing what we do.
And you do it so well. James, from me, I want to say thank you to you and the amazing CL team. You are always so openly supportive of your team as well. For anyone watching this podcast, we get lots of people who find us because they're at the start of their blood cancer journeys. They may have come to us for sources of information, or they may just be looking for a charity that they want to support. Is there any message that you would like to give to the people watching this podcast now who think, should I or shouldn't I get involved with Cure Leukaemia?
Yeah, get involved with Cure Leukaemia. One, you're going to make a difference. Like I said, whether it's from £5 or £50, you're going to meet some amazing people. But most of all, you're going to give more people, like yourself, the chance to survive and living their lives. And I think there can't be a much better reason than wanting to get involved and have some fun along the way, hopefully.
And quite often it's quite madness, isn't it?
It can be, yeah, but that's what makes us, I suppose.
That's what we do. James McLaughlin, the CEO of Cure Leukaemia, thank you so much for joining us on the sofa. And if anybody is watching this podcast and you would like to get involved more with our incredible charity, the details on how you can do so are in the description below this video. My name is Adam Joyce, and this is Let's Talk Blood Cancer, the Patients Podcast.